A friend of mine spent the better part of a year convinced he needed a new pillow. What he actually had was sleep apnea, and he had no idea. He'd wake up almost every morning with a dull headache, and he'd worked through the logical explanations one at a time. Wrong pillow, too much screen time, maybe dehydration. He bought 2 pillows. He tried an app. The headache stayed, and eventually he stopped mentioning them because a problem you can't solve and can't explain just becomes background noise. What he never considered, because almost nobody does, is that the headache wasn't starting in the morning at all. It was the leftover evidence of something that had been happening all night. That's the pattern with sleep apnea, and it is the reason it stays hidden in plain sight. The condition is not invisible because it has no symptoms. It is invisible because every single one of its symptoms has an innocent-looking explanation sitting right next to it. So I want to walk through the actual warning signs, what they are, why they get waved off, and which one is the easiest in the world to miss. We're talking specifically about obstructive sleep apnea here. There is also central sleep apnea, which works differently. Start with the signs other people notice because those are the ones you physically cannot observe yourself. You're unconscious when they happen. The loudest of them, literally, is snoring. Johns Hopkins Medicine puts it directly. As snoring gets louder, the chance of sleep apnea gets greater. But the snoring itself isn't the diagnostic sign. The American Lung Association is careful to point out that not everyone who snores has sleep apnea, and not everyone with sleep apnea snores. The sign that actually matters is more specific. It's when a bed partner notices the snoring is punctuated by silence, a pause, then a gasp, or a snort, then the snoring resumes. Those pauses are the apnea events themselves, and the gasping that ends them may be the single most important signal of all. Research cited by sleepapnea.org suggests that witnessed gasping or choking during sleep is one of the strongest indicators that a person should be referred for a sleep study. There's a quieter sign in this same group, one that does not make a sound. Restless sleep. Johns Hopkins describes people with apnea waking up under a twisted pile of disheveled sheets, kicking, thrashing, jerking through the night. When your body is repeatedly struggling to breathe, it does not lie still. But from the outside, a partner just sees a restless sleeper, and that restlessness gets blamed on stress, or a warm room, or a bad mattress. The second group is the signs you do notice, the ones that wake you, however briefly. The most dramatic is jolting awake, gasping or choking, your body's hard reset when oxygen has dropped too far. People often surface from it just enough to register a racing heart and a feeling of breathlessness, then fall back asleep and forget it by morning. Then there's waking with a dry or sore throat, which the apnea sufferer almost always blames on the bedroom air. WebMD points to the real mechanism. Apnea often forces you to breathe through an open mouth all night, which dries the throat directly. And there's one more in this group that almost never gets connected to sleep at all, waking repeatedly to use the bathroom. Most people file that under aging or drinking water too late. It can also be the body responding to the strain of interrupted breathing. The third group is the hardest, because these are the daytime signs, and daytime signs are where sleep apnea does its best disappearing act. They don't happen in bed. They show up hours later, far from the cause, wearing the costume of completely ordinary problems. Morning headaches are the clearest example, and they're not rare. Sleepapnea.org notes that up to 30% of people with obstructive sleep apnea report waking up with them. That was my friend's entire year, spent shopping for pillows. Then there's brain fog, irritability, trouble concentrating, low mood. Each of these is real, and each of these is also exactly what a stressful month feels like, or a demanding job, or simply not being 25 anymore. When a symptom is indistinguishable from ordinary life, it stops registering as a symptom. It just becomes you. If you've been measuring your symptoms against your life and concluding that you're just busy or stressed or getting older, this is the place to slow down, because there's one daytime sign that's worth separating out from all the others, and it is the one almost everyone gets wrong. The distinction is between fatigue and sleepiness, and they are not the same thing. Fatigue is low energy, feeling drained, finding it hard to summon the effort to get through the day. Daytime sleepiness is different. It is the actual pull of sleep itself, arriving when it should not. Sleepapnea.org draws the line clearly, and it is worth holding on to. It is daytime sleepiness, not fatigue, that is the hallmark symptom of obstructive sleep apnea. It shows up in a very particular way: nodding off while reading, drifting while watching television, fighting your eyes in a meeting where you are not the one speaking, or worst of all, struggling to stay awake behind the wheel. That is not laziness, and it is not a low-energy personality. A person sleeping normally does not fall asleep reading a page in the early afternoon. If you want to measure this properly, doctors often use something called the Epworth Sleepiness Scale, which asks about your likelihood of dozing in specific situations. And the reason this is the sign to watch is the same reason it gets missed. Everyone feels tired sometimes, so a tired person assumes they are normal. The question that actually separates the two is not how tired you feel. It is whether sleep keeps arriving at moments you never invited it. Now, none of these signs means much in isolation, and it's worth being honest about that. Plenty of people snore, plenty of people are tired. What changes the math is who's carrying the signs. Some people should treat these symptoms far more seriously than others, and the risk factors are well documented. The Mayo Clinic lists the major ones for obstructive sleep apnea: excess weight, being male, being older, a family history of the condition, and chronic nasal congestion. Excess weight ranks high for a concrete physical reason. Fat deposits around the upper airway narrow the space and make the surrounding tissue more likely to collapse inward during sleep. And there's one risk factor specific enough to measure with a tape measure: neck circumference. Fat stored in the neck presses on the airway from the outside, and the threshold is well established. Research, including work from the Sleep Heart Health Study, identifies a neck circumference above 17 inches in men and approximately 16 inches in women as a marker of meaningfully elevated risk. In fact, that study found neck circumference to be a stronger predictor of obstructive sleep apnea than snoring, age, or even body mass index. A number you could check in 30 seconds outranks most of what people actually worry about. So stack it together. If you snore loudly, if anyone has ever told you that you stop breathing or gasp in your sleep, if you wake unrefreshed after a full night, if mornings come with headaches, if sleep ambushes you in the afternoon, and if you are also carrying the weight, the age, the family history, or the neck measurement, those are not 7 unrelated quirks. They are a single pattern, and the pattern has a name, and it has a test. The test is a sleep study, and it gives a number for how many times each hour your breathing is interrupted. If you do have sleep apnea, the most common treatment is a CPAP machine, a device that delivers continuous positive airway pressure through a mask while you sleep. There are also newer treatments emerging, including oral appliances called mandibular advancement devices, and even a medication called tirzepatide, also known as Zepbound, which was approved for sleep apnea treatment in December 2024 by the Food and Drug Administration. My friend eventually mentioned the headaches to a doctor, not because he connected them to sleep, but because they had simply gone on too long. The doctor asked one follow-up question he had not expected. Did he snore? And had anyone ever heard him stop breathing? He had. His wife had been telling him for years. He had spent 12 months and a fair amount of money solving a pillow problem he never had, because the headache showed up in the morning, and mornings are where you look for the cause of a morning headache. The cause had been 3 feet away, in the dark, every night, the whole time.